Hey, everybody, and welcome to the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce candidate interviews for the 2022 general election. What I've done is I've taken 6 races between the 26th Legislative District and the 35th Legislative District. I'm taking the 12 candidates, 12 interviews, spliced them together to come up with 6 videos for those 6 races. I've asked all the candidates the same questions. We were fortunate enough this year to get all the candidates to participate. We've also included the Kitsap County Commissioners race, which is District 3. District 3 includes north of South Kitsap, Bremerton, up into just a little bit north of Silverdale. So it's the central Seebeck area. Even though you don't live in that area, if you live in Kitsap County, you do get to vote in that race, so I would encourage you to check out that video also. And then lastly, a word on the video production itself. I am not a professional videographer, never claimed to be. So what I've done is I've taken the 14 videos, spliced them together. There may occasionally be an awkward silence. There may be some abrupt boom, next question, things like that. I've kind of cut out any small talk and courtesies that may have taken place throughout the course of the videos. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned a little bit of something here. If you did, make sure you tell your friends about it so that they can watch and make an informed decision. But again, I want to stress, most important, vote, get your ballot in by August 8th. I understand if you get your ballots in as soon as you get them, then there is less chance of getting political junk mail. So thanks for watching and have a great day. Hey everybody, it's Chamber Matt, and I am meeting right now with Spencer Hutchins, who is running for the position #1 state representative in the 26th Legislative District. 26th Legislative District runs through Key Peninsula, Pierce County, north of the Narrows Bridge, up through South Kitsap, and a sliver of Bremerton. So you've got quite a geographical area that you're covering there, Spencer. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you.
It's great to see you. Thank you very much, Matt, and thanks to the South Kitsap Chamber and your members and the whole community. I really appreciate these opportunities to have a conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so what I've got is I've got probably about half a dozen questions, and we'll just kind of go through them. I'm going to end up splicing you and Adison together just to try to get one video with all the answers in it. And so we'll just go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to ask you the easiest question first. And that is simply, Spencer, tell us about yourself and why are you running for state representative?
Well, thank you, Matt, for the question, and thanks again to the South Kitsap Chamber for your welcome. And I'm glad to have this opportunity to answer questions and explain a little bit about me. So I grew up in the 26th district. I have lived here since I was 2 years old. It's been 35 years now that I've lived in this community, and I absolutely love this community. I was raised by people in this community, mentored and cared for by people in this community, given my first and almost all of my opportunities in life right here in this community. So I grew up in the 26th district. I own a real estate brokerage with offices in Port Orchard, Silverdale, and Gig Harbor. I am really grateful to be part of our vibrant economy here. I was on the Gig Harbor City Council for a few years. I've served in congressional staff. I've served on legislative staff down in Olympia. I'm a business owner. You know, my roots go deep here in Washington and here in our local area. My wife, Christy, and I have long since decided that this will be the place that we stay for the rest of our lives. This is where we want to plant our roots deep. We have 2 children. Rory is 3, Sabrina is 1, and baby number 3 is on the way here soon. You know, we just feel so blessed to live in such a beautiful and wonderful community. And that's a little bit about me. And frankly, it dovetails on why I'm running. The reason I'm running is because my wife and I have been very concerned about the direction that we have seen our state and our community go over the last few years, especially. We're raising children who we hope will stay here, invest themselves here in this community, build families, build businesses, create opportunity right here at home. And we're worried that those opportunities are becoming less and less. We're worried about our safety and security as we see crime skyrocketing. I'm worried about the cost of living that we're all facing as inflation, as taxes just keep piling up. And someone needs to step forward and say, coming from within our community, a regular guy needs to step forward, a regular woman, someone needs to step forward and say, I want to stand for some common sense and some balance. And that's what I'm doing.
Hey everybody, it's Chamber Matt, and I am meeting with Adison Richards today. Adison is running for position 1 in the 26th Legislative District. Adison, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Really grateful to be here with you, Matt, and to have this opportunity.
So the format here is I've got half a dozen-ish questions to go ahead and hit you with, and we'll probably just flow right through them. Sound good?
Sounds great. Thank
you. All right. So first question, which sometimes I always say is the hardest, is tell us about yourself and why are you running for state representative?
Well, I again want to just say thank you to you and the chamber for having me today and the opportunity to be here. It means a lot. My name is Adison Richards, as said, and I'm running for this job for a few main reasons. One is to use the experience that I've gained as a lawyer for crime victims, for people working paycheck to paycheck, to address issues like public safety and our rising cost of living. Second, I grew up working for my dad's landscape business. He started a small business about 15 years ago, and I got my start digging irrigation trenches and mowing lawns and hauling rocks and bark around in the sun. And so I want to create more opportunities for people like him to start businesses and have it be easier to survive and thrive, especially in those first few years of starting a business here in South Kitsap. And then a third reason is to just help make more of a difference than I have in the capacities that I've been serving in. I also get to coach cross country at Peninsula High School, where I went to school, and it's fun to give back in that way. And I see these kids running around the track, and I want them to have the opportunity to pursue a trade or to go on to an affordable college. You know, I feel like they're really getting squeezed right now, and everyone can really benefit from having the options of pursuing a trade or going to a school they can afford. And so, you know, to kind of circle back to number one, like I said, I've been a lawyer the past few years, and I've been working with people experiencing domestic violence, human trafficking, other crimes like that, and people who otherwise couldn't afford a lawyer. And so I just want to first recognize that we've got immense public safety challenges. And I hear it from business owners who are seeing not only windows broken, but just people stealing goods and just there's a lot of issues I know that folks are facing and struggling with. Not only, and I mean, on my front, I saw domestic violence increasing across the areas that I served here in Kitsap County and Pierce County. And so I know the system, and I know the court system. I have experience that I'm hoping to bring to the table, working with law enforcement, working with our first responders. And I'm proud to have the support of the Kitsap County Sheriff. I'm proud to have the support of South Kitsap firefighters and the Kitsap County prosecutor. And so I want to get to work on those things. And then, yeah, I can expand further onto the other issues as well as we go into the interview. But I should also just, again, reiterate that I grew up here. This is my home. This is where I want to serve and give back in a meaningful way, work with people across the aisle on solutions that are going to work for the community and to fight for this community in the majority caucus where we haven't had a voice for a long
time. First real question then, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, is about business and starting a business and keeping a business open. And this question here, I've got, one of the biggest challenges facing business owners today is the rising costs of doing business. Those costs may include fuel prices, energy prices, inflation, the rising labor cost, supply chain backlog, regulations, taxes, employment taxes, B&O taxes, other payroll taxes, First part of this question then is, what role does government play in helping small business owners keep their costs down?
Government can make it easy or hard to operate a business. And as you're alluding to, there are things that our state government is doing that are making it difficult to operate businesses, particularly small businesses in our area. And I support reforming our B&O tax code. I think we should look at changing the definitions of what it either means to be a small business or create even a different category of businesses, a micro business category, to reflect the mom and pop shops that we see in Port Orchard and in downtown Bremerton and across Kitsap County, where they have fewer than 50 employees and fewer than 2 million in gross profit, which is the current legal definition for a small business. And with that should come licensing assistance. It should come with accounting assistance. It should come with assistance getting insurance. And I was talking to a business owner in Bremerton who's been trying to start up his own unique cold brew coffee truck that he'll drive around town and deliver cold brew coffee. And he gave me a free sample, and it uses a nitro system, and it's awesome. But the state government has been super hard on him in getting this started up. He's had no problems, he said, working with the county, working with the city. It's the state who won't get back to him. I just think that's unacceptable, and that has to change. On top of that, there's you alluded to supply chain issues. I think from a state government standpoint, like, we have to work on our infrastructure, right? Gorst has needed a solution, for example, for years. It's also a national security risk. And we need somebody like I said earlier, in the majority caucus, fighting for our priorities around here and making sure that we have infrastructure needs met for our community to move goods to and from places. On top of that is broadband. We have so many people working from home, so many people trying to, or who just rely on it. And as I'm driving through parts of Olalla in 2022, or even other areas of Port Orchard, right? You lose service, and you're like, we've been making phone calls for 100 years. Like, why can I not connect here? And there's got to be a better way of doing it. It takes some advocacy from our state representatives, and so I want to work on those things in particular. Happy to expand more as well.
Sure. So, and a follow up to this question, and then we'll talk about maybe some of your other things that you mentioned. You mentioned B&O tax reform. So this question deals with two topics. One is the, what specifically would you do to support keeping costs down, helping to keep costs down? And then I guess one of the kickers is that Washington State does have an enormous surplus right now, a surplus of revenue. Do you support any tax relief, for local businesses? And if so, what would that be?
So yes, I do support business tax relief, and we should have used some of the surplus funds to provide relief for small businesses, as well as for homeowners. We've been seeing property taxes go up, for example. And there's a whole other system we can get into that needs reform, but I do support the tax relief, and we should have seen some coming from the state. And then there's been discussions of changing B&O taxes to and doing something else that makes more sense for businesses. And I'm really interested in looking at those options, because I know that right now the cost of trying to pay for taxes and keep up with them is really high. This is out of the county, but I was talking to a business owner in Pierce County, operates out of Fox Island. And he was just talking about how it is so much of their profits is going towards paying taxes. And so I know that it's making things hard on our small businesses, and I want to do something about that.
You mentioned the cost of living increases for individuals. So my first question, kind of addresses the costs of doing business. And one of the biggest challenges facing businesses is the rising costs of doing business. That could be fuel costs, energy costs, simply inflation, rising labor costs, supply chain backlogs, regulations, taxes, B&O, payroll, employment taxes. All those things all contributed to the expenses that it costs to run a business. What role do you see government playing in helping businesses to keep their costs down?
The role of the government as it relates to business and business costs and business opportunities is to get out of the way of our local job creators. The engine of our economy is our local small businesses. And I think people often are confused. Certainly the halls of power, I think, are confused about what a business is. I think, Matt, you and I both know that a business is often one person, one employee, maybe two, maybe three, not the hundreds and thousands of people that make up a conglomeration. I think the state of Washington feels like the business community is a bottomless well of resources that the state can go back to again and again and again. I think your members know, I certainly know as a business owner, owning a business, running a business, employing people does not make you wealthy automatically. It is a lot of work. It is a labor of love. It's a hard slog. And the state treats the business community like it's just an endless supply of funds. We need a state that wants to create an environment in which it is easier to employ people. It is easier to get into business. Regulations are right now, it seems to me, in place to keep people from getting into business, to keep people from starting a company. And that's just wrong. The engine of our economy is our local small businesses. So what's the role? The role of the government is to make it easier, not harder, to make it less expensive, not more expensive, to make it the goal of the government to help people achieve their private dreams and goals. And right now, unfortunately, that's not where the state of Washington is. We have gas taxes going up. We have capital gains income taxes that have been created. We have long-term care taxes. We are seeing things skyrocketing, not to mention our inflation. And at a time when the state of Washington saw a $15 billion revenue surplus, the legislature spent it all and then raised taxes. That right there is the definition of being unhelpful to our business community.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that surplus, because that's part of the next question here. What specifically would you support in keeping costs down for businesses, and then keeping in mind the enormous, budget surplus? Would you support tax relief for the local businesses? And if so, what would that look like?
I would support, I very much would support relief in taxes. I just put out a statement just a couple days ago that said the first thing the legislature must do when it comes into session in January is create some common sense, practical, and balanced tax relief for businesses and for citizens. We need to see our B&O tax regime really changed. It's too much of a one-size-fits-all system, and it costs too much. It's taking too much. We need to see our sales tax looked at, and the cost of sales tax on people. When the state is budgeting for a certain amount of revenue, and then lo and behold, they bring in $15 billion more in a given year than they budgeted for. Let's just be really clear. That's $2,000 in more revenue per Washingtonian than the state had originally budgeted for. I think we can say that our revenues are healthy. Our revenues are certainly healthy, and we need to look at how we can reduce the burden. So B&O taxes need to be alleviated. Sales taxes need to be looked at and adjusted. What we really need to look at is the effect of our gas taxes, because so much of the driver of the cost of goods and services is the cost of transportation. And the state of Washington is on the cusp of being the worst state in the country for the cost of gas taxes. Based on the Department of Ecology's estimates, we're looking at almost a doubling of our gas taxes in 2023. That is unconscionable, and it's unsustainable. And it is driving up the cost of doing business. It's driving up the cost of product, and it's driving up the cost of living. The other thing we've got to do to protect the costs on our small businesses and on our business economy is the crime problem. We have people having to build into their budgets the loss of revenue through the loss of product, through vandalism, through damage done. That cost is being passed on to businesses, onto the employees in loss of livelihood, and it's being passed on to the consumers in increased cost of the goods. Across the board, the state of Washington needs to help bring those costs down and bring some common sense tax relief.
Spencer, what major issues do you see facing Washington State in the next couple of years?
There are two issues tied together inextricably. our safety, our crime and policing issues, and our cost of living, our taxes, our economy, and our cost of living, and they are tied together. In my answer on how we can bring costs down and what we need to do to bring costs down, I mentioned crime and the problem of crime in driving up our costs. But I'm talking to people who have never seen our Port Orchard, our Bremerton, our Gig Harbor communities ever look as dangerous, as unsafe as they are now. Property crime has skyrocketed. I have a friend who just had their car stolen out of their driveway a few weeks ago in the middle of a neighborhood. You know, this has never happened before. I've personally witnessed, what, 3 or 4 shoplifts now, standing in the store while someone shoplifts. I have never, until I was 37 years old, experienced that in our community. How do you feel about that? I mean, we feel like things are going the wrong direction. So this is a major concern for people. Drugs, mental health, you know, crime, property crime, our murder rate has skyrocketed. These things are really all tied together with the cost of living here. It is costing us more to live and work, do business, employ people, and be employed in our local community. And so much of it, Matt, is policy driven by unwise, ill-conceived policies coming out of Olympia. Too many taxes, too many regulations, too many fees, coupled with not enough support for law enforcement, not enough disciplined approach to violent property and drug crime. And it all comes together into a pretty noxious stew of really a diminishing of our quality of life here.
This next question gives you an opportunity to talk about some of those other issues that you talked about, other than homelessness and affordable housing, because I've got separate questions on those. But so this question is, you know, what are the major issues you see facing Washington State in the next couple of years?
So other than our housing crisis and homelessness, we took a couple big ones off the table. But look, public safety is going to continue to be a challenge as we go forward. And you know, I support reforms there. I support things like funding our first responders, and we can do that as a state through better funding the court system and better funding things like state patrol and victim advocates to relieve a lot of the burdens that are being placed on the counties, because principally counties are responsible for funding law enforcement, for funding the court system, and for doing all those things. So if we free up a little bit of space for Kitsap County, for example, to hire more law enforcement for the county, then that's something that we need to do. On top of that, you know, we've got rising costs of living in other areas like childcare, for example. I think that it should be tax-free, if not next to tax-free, to operate a childcare service in Washington State. We need to work with people that want us to be childcare providers, because we have a supply problem on that front. We have a supply problem on the long-term care front. We do not have enough providers of these things, and it is leading to not only escalating costs, but people just not getting the services that they need. And if we look at childcare, for example, it means that there's a parent that can't go to work and that's taking income out of the household. Or it seems like if they are going to work, all of the money is going to childcare, and then what's the point of going to work? I have so many friends who have had kids who are like, there's no point in me working, because it all just goes into childcare anyway, or the benefit is just not there, and I'm missing all this time with my kids, so why bother? So we've got to address that as a state. We've got mental health and substance abuse crises that are going on, which bleeds into our homelessness crisis. We are principally working on addressing mental health and substance abuse in the state through ERs, jail cells, and tents on the street. And that's not sustainable. It has not been sustainable ever. And we've got to address that so much better than we have. And we need solutions here now. So those are a few ideas.
So Adison, how is Washington State setting itself up for success when it comes to the increasing energy costs and the shift away from fossil fuels? The demand for electricity is going to increase. It's increasing rapidly. Washington State supports the removal of dams in the Snake River. And you know, how will or can Washington compensate for the loss of power supply while the demand for electricity is increasing?
Matt, first and foremost, I'm a person who does not believe that one size fits all regulations are the way to go here, and that's unfortunately a lot of what we've been seeing from the state government. We saw, for example, hey, we're trying to phase out the sale of gas powered cars. I drive a gas powered car with 260,000 miles on it, and I know that everyone around me does, or at least maybe not that high a mileage, but everyone. That's going to be an incredible undertaking to try to phase out gas powered cars, and to simply say, hey, we're not doing this anymore is not good enough. We have to make it affordable. We have to have tax incentives, I believe, tax relief to help give the market an opportunity to adjust and to move into these things. Now, I do see an opportunity in other areas, though, for not only creating jobs, but creating energy independence. So currently 2/3 of our state power does come from hydroelectric power. About another third comes from fossil fuels, and another third comes from renewable energy. If we were to not only create tax incentives, but create a jobs program so that business owners like one I've met in Port Orchard, who's installing solar panels, are invested in and incentivized to do that work. If we're creating jobs at West Sound Tech and across our region, building renewable energy sources, then we can phase out fossil fuels, and you have people creating energy in their own backyard. And I think the more that we have that supply of renewable energy sources, that'll help bring the cost of bringing those sources on, or bringing those sources onto the grid down. The more that we have it be accessible, and the cheaper that as a state government we make it. So I think we've got a lot of work to do on that front. And I see it through working with people that have these businesses, working with market forces, coming up with solutions that are market based, so that we're not just passing one size fits all regulations and just saying, hey, good luck with this, everybody. We're being smart and pursuing these wisely so that we keep costs down and help create energy independence.
So, Washington State, I guess the question is, how do you see Washington State setting itself up for success when it comes to increasing energy costs? We're shifting away from fossil fuels. The demand for electricity is only going to go up. On the other hand, Washington State supports the removal of dams on the Snake River. How do you think Washington is going to be able to compensate for the loss of power while the demand for electricity is increasing?
Washington is setting itself up for massive failure when it comes to our energy needs. We have policies that are diametrically opposed to one another, smashing together in the halls of power in Olympia. We have a governor and an administration and a legislative leadership that says we want green energy, green energy. We want more energy, more energy. We want cheaper energy, cheaper energy. Simultaneously, we're talking about knocking down dams. We're talking about just carte blanche by executive fiat getting rid of gas-powered vehicles. Now, how do we think we're going to be able to meet the incredible demand on our electrical grid that comes with all electric vehicles at the same time we are reducing our electrical output? How do we expect that we're going to get cheaper energy when the state of Washington is picking winners and losers on the energy front and saying, we won't do this type, we won't do that type, we won't do this type, and we'll really only focus on this one or these two, right? We'll talk about wind and we'll talk about solar. And just those two will meet not only today's energy needs, but tomorrow's magnificently expanded energy needs. It's impractical. It's not realistic. And the citizens of the state of Washington need to demand not just better policies from Olympia, they need to demand pragmatism, reality, practical solutions. I want to see an Olympia that encourages exploration and development of all types of energy. I want to see Olympia unshackle the imagination, the investment capability of private industry and private people to come up with great ways of meeting our energy demand. And I really hope I don't sound naive, because I think the naivete in this situation really belongs solely in the administration and the legislature, as they have been legislating and regulating our energy sector. So we really have to get serious about what our energy needs are, and create some balance between the energy needs and what is creating that energy, the output of that energy. And right now, there's no balance whatsoever. We need more, we need it to be cheaper, and we're creating a system that will create less energy and more expensive energy. There is no way that that system will be successful. There just isn't. And I'm looking forward to working in Olympia on bringing some practicality to our energy conversation, because we need it.
Do you think that Washington State should be more concerned, the legislature should be more concerned with controlling its spending and relying less on tax increases to pay for government? And what can the government do to better control its spending?
I was asked recently how I thought we could afford the work that the government needs to do, the services the government needs to provide, if we are reducing taxes. And my response to that person was, we have had a budget surplus of $15 billion over the last year, $2,000 per Washingtonian in additional revenue that was brought in. That's before we ever look at dropping taxes. That's just the tax rates as they were. And ironically, of course, in the face of that budget surplus, the legislature increased taxes, which makes it all the more likely that we will see expanding government revenue, more tax dollars, more tax dollars. I don't think we have a problem bringing in revenue. I think we have a problem that we are addicted to government spending. When the government brought in $15 billion in increased unbudgeted revenue, they spent it all and then asked the citizens for more money. It's not a question of how much money the government's bringing in, it's a question of how they're spending it. And the way the government needs to prioritize its spending is looking first at the Constitution, which says we will fund the fundamentals of education fully. That's number one. Number two, we need to look at prioritizing the needs of our community. Infrastructure, so education, infrastructure, and our healthcare needs, our mental health services, drug treatment and drug rehabilitation programs, and dovetailing right along with that is our law enforcement and keeping our communities safe. When we make the government's priorities really crystal clear, that will help us be good stewards of the public's money. Right now, the priorities of government are not clear. It's how much can we get? Now let's spend it on whatever we can spend it on. And that's not that is not how any of us run our budgets in our businesses or at our kitchen tables. The government needs to get as serious with its budget as we do about our own. And not everyone has an unlimited credit card. They can just keep running up every time they want to spend more money. Instead, we as private people have to manage our expenses. The government needs to learn how to do the same. Prioritize education, prioritize infrastructure, law enforcement, crime and policing, and bring down the cost for all of us of our cost of living here in Washington. It's complicated, but it's not so complicated it can't be done.
Should Washington State be more concerned about controlling its spending and relying less on tax increases to pay for government? And kind of the follow-up with that is, what can state government do to better control its spending?
Yes, it can be a whole lot better, and it needs to be. Look, I'm somebody who does believe that we should be first and foremost concerned about outcomes when it comes to paying taxes, but also that it's the people's money. It's the money of people that are working really hard and doing the right things, and we need to honor that resource and not just look at it as a stat on a piece of paper, because it is money coming out of people's pockets that could be going towards other things, and so we need to honor that first and foremost. And I think that there's a lot of ways to help make our state government more efficient and more accountable. Like there's the department heads, for example, whether it's at unemployment security or it's at the Department of Corrections, who need to be held accountable to what is the bureaucracy doing, who's doing what, and what outcomes are we seeing here, how is the workforce being treated, And is the people's money being spent well? And so I think that can help change some things. But we also are seeing taxes, or other sources of revenue going up, whether it's in our cannabis industry, or we saw sales taxes go up over the past few years. And so that means there should be some tax relief coming back to folks as well along with that, and not just dumping more money into programs or subsidizing things like just subsidizing programs where you have escalating costs and no real solutions or incentives to help stabilize those costs.
I alluded to affordable housing and homelessness a little bit earlier, and I told you not to address those, but I do want to give you an opportunity now. Because a lot of the questions that I've asked, have kind of had a more heavier business emphasis. And while people may not necessarily recognize, affordable housing and homelessness as a business issue, it does concern business owners, and it does affect the community. What role could state play in addressing homelessness and affordable housing?
It plays a huge role because our zoning laws and the Growth Management Act are driving the current crisis in housing. So Washington State is last in the country in terms of the available units of housing per person. The rental vacancy rate is incredibly low, and what we know is that when there are very few units to rent, the cost of rent starts becoming linked to supply and demand, and the costs start going through the roof. And then that starts pushing out people on fixed incomes. It starts pushing people out who just are not making enough money at their jobs. And that is contributing to the sprawl that we're seeing out here into South Kitsap from places like Seattle and Tacoma. And then we also have broken zoning laws in our big cities, Seattle, Everett, Tacoma, Lakewood, which are far below their growth management targets, for example, and they are not acting like the big cities that they are. And so if you cannot afford to live where you work, if you're working in Seattle, for example, then you're going to come out here, and hey, that's been a good thing for a lot of people out here, and you can now catch an awesome fast ferry from Port Orchard or from Bremerton to get to Seattle. But it's also contributing to all the traffic on our freeways. It's backing up I-5, and then it's also making it more unaffordable to live here in South Kitsap, the more that we allow these broken zoning laws to stay on the books. So we've got to change that. And then we've got to change the Growth Management Act so that we're being more strategic about where growth is happening. I go through Sedgwick all the time, and I drive past the Lowe's and go onto Sydney Road, and on my way back to the Key Peninsula, stop at Nana maybe for some teriyaki. But I see those apartment buildings going up, and they're on 2-lane roads, and I go, like, where is the infrastructure to support this? And so I just want to work with the city of Port Orchard, work with the mayor, the city council members across the board, be a partner, and also work on the Growth Management Act to change up our not only our zoning laws, but that law, so that we're being really strategic about where housing is going, and that'll help address the housing crisis. For homelessness, there are a lot of other things that we need to do as well, from boosting substance abuse treatment and mental health treatment, like I talked about earlier, but also creating more shelter space. Right now, there's a court case out of Boise that says you cannot criminalize homelessness if you don't have some place to put people. And so let's build up the shelter capacity so that at least, law enforcement or whoever is responding to a crisis can say, hey, look, we've got some place for you to go, and then have services there available, right? So that it's not just, hey, it's a free night. There's going to be an opportunity for people to get the help that they need and connect with a service. I also have kind of this wonky idea that we needed a AmeriCorps for Washington State, a walk for example, and perhaps we can create some incentives and create some job opportunities for kids coming out of college to become a social worker for a couple years or a year, and start identifying what is the crisis in someone's life that's contributing to their homelessness, and direct them to where they need to go in order to help solve that crisis. But at the end of the day, it's unacceptable to leave people on the side of the road. It's not sustainable for our businesses. It's not sustainable for our population. We can't just let people camp out in parks where we try to take our kids and enjoy a nice day. People need to, have at least some shelter space and services, and then we gotta get back on our feet. So those are a few. That's a huge topic, and I hope I.
So now my last question, and while most of these questions I've tried to relate them kind of to the business side of things, this one is not necessarily directly related to business, but it does play an important role in business and in the community. And this question deals with homelessness and affordable housing. What role could the state play in addressing homelessness and affordable housing?
The state has a very important role to play in homelessness and affordable housing. And they're linked, but they're a little bit different. And I think it's important to understand how. So first things first, let's talk about housing. I got called out on this a little bit actually in the primary when an old quote of mine from my days on city council got trotted out, where I said that housing affordability is largely a function of the economy, a function of the market. And that should not be a controversial statement. That should be 101, right? Economics 101, that should be patently obvious. That when prices go up, affordability goes down. When prices go down, affordability goes up. And so long as our wages stay strong, those basics of macroeconomics are true. So what causes housing to be so unaffordable? Well, there's obviously macroeconomic factors, but there's also things like the government regulation that we're all dealing with. On city council, I had to deal day in and day out with the Growth Management Act. And the Growth Management Act is doing exactly what it was meant to do, responding to 90s style urban sprawl in California by creating a one-size-fits-all regulatory overlay on our local communities and saying you can only grow in very specific, often arbitrary urban areas, and you can't grow outside of those areas. And what that causes is major density in urban areas that can't keep up with the housing demand, and less housing out in the suburban areas where we have opportunity to grow and meet housing demand. It also drives up cost because the environmental, the permitting requirements at the state and local level that go into any project amounts to about 30% of the cost of that project. Can you imagine? About 30% of the cost of a new house is regulatory in nature. It's fees. That inevitably adds a 30% chunk on the top of that housing project, which makes it very difficult for people to afford. The legislature needs to get serious about the Growth Management Act and make it work for the people that it's meant to serve. Right now, it's not. Right now, it's hamstringing local governments, it's hamstringing local developers and builders. And it's also decimating people's property rights. We need to take a long, hard look at the Growth Management Act and how it's affecting our housing crisis. With respect to homelessness, obviously, the more expensive housing is, the more we will have a homelessness crisis. But there's also some drug issues involved in that, and there's some mental health issues involved in that. And Washington State in the 21st century should be a world-class place for mental health treatment and for drug rehabilitation. And unfortunately, we are in the ditch on those issues. I am committed to putting resources into those programs, into creating drug treatment processes that treat people like human beings and help them achieve a better quality of life, help people get the mental health treatment they need so that they can, again, go forward into a more positive life. The state deserves to treat its citizens with dignity and respect, and right now we're not. And when we address these issues, along with some of the regulatory burdens that I talked about before, we will take a big bite out of the housing crisis, the housing affordability crisis, and the housing stock crisis. I'm really passionate about this. This is part of my business. This is part of my career. And when I watch new homeowners be unable to find a place to live, or people trying to rent and there's nothing available on the market, that hurts me. And I take it personally. So this is something that I really want to see us address.
The last question is the one that makes everybody squirm, makes them start sweating and stuff like that. This question is, why should the voters of Kitsap County in the 26th Legislative District select you as their next state representative in the 26th District?
This is a very important question, and it's one that I'm really happy to answer. And my answer comes from the conversations that I've had with members of our community. As I knock on doors, as I attend events, as I'm out there in the community talking to people, I consistently hear something more than anything else. And this may surprise people, but this I hear more than anything else. Our politics are toxic and broken, and the legislative process is toxic and broken. We need common sense and balance and a sense of bipartisanship in our halls of power. I hear this over and over again, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. I'm passionate about bipartisanship and working together across the aisle with people I agree with and with people I may not agree with to find solutions that will benefit our community. And it's not just a talking point to me. This is a lifestyle for me. This is a passion of mine. My campaign manager is a liberal Democrat. She's not my campaign manager because she agrees with me on every policy that I might hold. She's my campaign manager because she believes in me personally. And we're together on this project of serving our community, being neighbors first and working together to serve our community. She's my campaign manager because I value being challenged and sharpened by people who may have a different worldview or different opinion than I do. And when you look around our community, we can all see people who we may not agree with, but it's super important to hear them. Right now, the legislature is very close to the majority party having a supermajority in the state legislature. I believe that the best policy for our community, our whole community, happens when the two political parties have to talk to each other. I believe that the best policy happens when the parties have to look at each other as partners, not as antagonists. And when you send me to Olympia, you're not just sending another vote to the majority party. You're sending a vote to Olympia that is someone who wants to sit down with my Democratic colleagues and talk about where we might agree. Understand the areas where we disagree, but talk about where we might agree and help advance some positive and common sense legislation. That's my passion. That's my heart. If you are worried like I am about the direction that we're going in, let's bring some balance back to Olympia. That's what I'm focused on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Great answers. Great answers to all the questions. Spencer, thank you for hanging out with me here. Hope it hasn't been too painful for you.
Great.
So, Adison, the last question, the tough question, the one that usually gets people squirming in their seat is, why should the voters of Kitsap County and the 26th Legislative District that goes all the way down to Key Peninsula and into Bremerton, why should they support you as the next representative from the 26th Legislative District?
Because of the experience that I've gained over the past few years as a lawyer and the work that I've done with people living paycheck to paycheck who are experiencing crimes like domestic violence and human trafficking. Look, when it comes to public safety, I know the court system. I've worked with law enforcement. I've worked with our prosecutors. I also am the only candidate in this race with support from them, and so I want to use that knowledge and that experience to benefit the community on this issue. When it comes to the rising cost of living, I've sat down with clients and we've filled out sheets highlighting how much they're paying in rent and how much they're paying for food and childcare and gas. And I know these pressure points, and I know how the state government can help ease some of the burdens faced by so many people right now on how much we are paying for things. And then on top of that, just growing up here, this is my backyard. I grew up running in places like Banner Forest and working for my dad's small business, running irrigation lines, like I said, in South Kitsap County. And so, look, I want to use that experience to just advocate for this community as hard as I can. Look, I'm a moderate person. I'm somebody who wants to work across the aisle, who wants to partner with the chamber and come up with solutions that are going to work for our community and work inside the majority party where we have not had an advocate for a long time. Look, we've been on a partisan note, we have been electing Republicans to this seat for a decade. And our roads are falling apart. We don't have the broadband that we need. Our schools are falling behind, and we need some more solutions for this community. And I want to get in there and I want to advocate for this community that I love in the majority caucus and make the biggest difference that I can.
Thank you, Adison, for joining us today. I want to remind everybody that the election, the official day, is coming up on November 8th. That's when everybody's ballots are due. So it should be coming out probably the middle of October, and get them in as soon as you can. I've heard that if you get your ballots in right away, you don't get as much political mail afterwards. So, if you get them in right away, then you don't get all the, dare I say, junk mail.
And my staffers won't call you, or I won't call you. You'll get left alone. So.
There you go. Yeah, and you and everybody else. So, thanks, Adison. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome.
And,
thank you so much.
You bet. You have a great day, Adison.
You as well. Thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate it. All right. Hope to see you soon.